Oh yeah, absolutely. I was a farm kid in Michigan, 1930s and 40s. So yes,
So you farmed, you were a farmer?
we had horses. Yeah,
What year was you born?
1931,
That puts you how old?
89.
89.
Yeah.
You're in good shape for 89.
Oh, that's what Elvin says. I don't. He's probably prejudiced.
Probably so, yeah.
I'm slipping. My mind is slipping. I saw some sticks downstairs in her basement a month or so ago, and I could not remember the word shuffleboard until the next day. So it's in there. It's working. But I can still remember a couple of things. I know a few things about the Bible.
No.
But what I'd like to do, is it all right if I pray before we begin?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Father in heaven, thank you for the privilege to talk with Mr. Burris here for a little while. We ask just now to direct our thoughts and our words that we can bring a blessing in this meeting today. In Jesus' name, amen.
So 1931 is when you were born.
Yeah.
Right after the Depression, or was you were right at the beginning of the Depression?
I was 14 when the atomic bomb attacked on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
And you remember that well?
Well, we didn't have TV until a little later, but when they had the atomic test, we were always watching those on TV. But the news, the war was ending right quick after that. There was a lot of uncertainty about doing an invasion of the Japanese mainland. That would have been a lot of thousands of people killed on both sides.
How would 9/11, the Twin Towers attack,
I'm
compared?
gonna have trouble hearing you.
How would the 9/11 Twin Towers being attacked compare to that?
It's a little bit like Kennedy's assassination. Everybody can remember just what they were doing when they heard that. When Kennedy's assassination news came on, I met my boss, my section chief, in the corridor, and he told me about it. 9/11, I was doing some yard work down behind our screen house, and I can remember clearly. I was glued to the TV the rest of the day. Yeah.
Do you think that this pandemic is? Were you ever lived in a time when they had like this pandemic, or is this new to you also?
Well, you know, they had the flu pandemic in 1918. There's making some comparisons with that now. But I don't know. Some people talking big conspiracies, and I don't buy into that.
You don't think it was? You think it was just life? Well,
the virus started out in Wuhan, China, apparently, and I think really if something had been done with public health responses when we've had the first cases out in Washington State, we'd have a different picture today. We wouldn't have nearly 500,000 people killed.
I guess it's hard to know what to do when it's something like that comes.
Well, separate, wear the masks.
Do you wear a mask out a lot? Or
not a whole lot, but if we go to Walmart, they demand it, and probably in most stores. I wear the mask a little bit when I go to church too.
Now you're right.
We're still having services in our church in person. Our pastor asked around a week or two ago whether they want to continue in person or have it only on Zoom for the next few weeks. And the opinion tipped toward keeping it open, but we separate rows. And
where is it you go to church?
Village Chapel down in McDonald, Seventh-day Adventist.
Where is that at? On South McDonald Road?
You know where McDonald is?
Yeah, but what about South McDonald
You go in there
Road?
and you turn up where the old school used to be. The church is right on the corner there.
Oh, yeah.
On Brimer Kick Road.
Yep, right on the corner, I think. Now, were you in the military?
Military?
Yeah.
I was in the Army for 2 years, just after the Korean War. I got in early enough, so I'm a Korean vet.
Were you drafted?
Well, actually, it was kind of strange. I had a 1A classification. I was coming out. I've been a student in deferment, and when I came out with my master's degree, I knew I was going to be picked off. So I called the draft board and said, "Can I displace somebody next month? Somebody next month that doesn't want to go." So actually, I volunteered for a draft. I could have enlisted for 2 years. I didn't realize that was open. I probably should have gone for a commission, but I didn't do that either. I just served 2 years. I was in Korea for a year.
Was that rough, or was it more like a?
After.
Was it a bad? It wasn't a bad war in Korea, right?
No, there's no conflict at all. I went over there in the spring of 1955. Came home in June of 1956. I went to a little clinic when I first went over there, lab technician, and midway that fall, they asked around, does anybody want to go to a lab school in Tokyo? Well, 6 weeks in Tokyo wasn't hard to take. So when I went back, they assigned me to a MASH hospital.
Just like on TV? Just like MASH on TV?
Oh, yeah. We didn't think it was quite that funny.
But was it similar?
It was very similar. Yeah.
Did you watch a lot of those episodes?
I watched them quite a bit. I don't know if they're still available somewhere, probably.
I'm sure, yeah. Now,
Alan Alda's an old man like me now.
Is he older than you?
I think he's probably younger than I am, but not by much.
Now, I see you a lot in town riding bicycle.
You've seen me on a bicycle?
A lot.
Where?
Everywhere. How many miles do you ride a week?
Actually, I hadn't even been on it for several weeks, and I may be hanging it up. But I rode across North Carolina in 1999. I rode Michigan to where we lived in New York in 1994.
But I saw you going down Keith Street 4 weeks ago. I saw you going down Keith Street 4 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah. You went right by Inman and Keith.
You must have had your notepad out. Do you see how I turn there at Inman Street?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
See, if you work with the traffic, you can do that.
Yeah.
You get in the turn lane. Don't try to go across all the traffic. Mm-hmm. You get in a turn lane, you can make your turn. Do you cycle?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I've never ridden with Alvin.
Alvin's a real good bike rider.
Oh, he's a tough rider.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
he is.
Yeah.
I can't keep up with him.
Yeah.
I can argue with him, but I can't. Now, let me ask you this: what did you do as a career?
Where did I go?
What did you do as a career for your?
Oh, I worked in drug research in upstate New York, Norwich, New York. You've heard of Pepto-Bismol and Augmentine. I worked for that company for 34 years.
And research?
Yeah.
What would you research?
Drugs and animals. The chemists were making new drugs all the time, and they would send out small samples. I made a small vial that have 2 or 3 ounces of the drug powder, and I made those up in solutions to test in animals. And one really highlight of my career, in 1963, that goes back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a drug there, a number that was actually part of a synthesis program for antibacterials. The Norwich Pharmaceutical Company had Firadan and other antibacterial treatments. That's what it was made for. But my job was I just look at this stuff, plug it into mice or some other kind of animal, and see what happens. If you can see what effect that drug has on the animal. And I give a whole different doses from 200, 400, 800, 1600 milligrams per kilogram, a whole range of doses to see how much it takes to kill them, actually. That's basically the thing. At 200, they're relaxed with that compound. 400, they were really relaxed. 800, they were like a dish rag. At 1600, they didn't die. How could this be? I was so amazed. The first day I saw that in mice. Later on, I tried it and a cat, a dog, and it had the same effect. It took them 10 years to get that on the market.
What was it?
It's called dantrium, dantrolene sodium. It's a muscle relaxant, but there is a thing that happens in anesthesia. I don't know if it's much of a problem now, but the time was when certain types of anesthetics would cause what they call malignant hyperthermia. People would go rigid in their muscles, and the temperature would go up to 108, and they died usually if all they could do was stop the operation, pack the patient in ice, and hope that they lived. But with that muscle relaxant available, then they kept it in operating rooms all over the world. A dose or two, a few doses over the next day or so while the anesthetic was washing out of the system, and no problem. So it was a lifesaver, and it sold a couple $1 million worth the first year they had it on the market.
So you've seen a lot of drugs come along you've seen a lot of valuable drugs come along since 1931, right?
Yeah, just that. But the pharmaceutical, the drugs have the side effects. You see it advertised on TV all the time. Ask your doctor, this is just what you need. If I see it advertised on TV, that's a pretty good argument they shouldn't use it.
Now, what do you think is the reason for your good health and being able to be active and ride a bicycle as much as you do?
My wife was a Seventh-day Adventist when we were married, and I didn't care anything much about the Bible. But I told myself...
How old were you when you got married?
27 and 28. I determined that I wouldn't make her to go to church alone, even though I didn't care anything about it.
Well, you just didn't...
She would talk to me about the Bible, and I'd say, look, don't push. Don't push. So I went to church with her regularly, almost every week, for more than 6 years, hearing about the Bible all this time. But I didn't really buy into it for all those years. We had children by the time I was baptized, 1965. Our children were 2 and 3 years old. And they would talk about the time when Daddy went to Binghamton and got married. So, baptism.
Mm-hmm. So are you Seventh-day Adventist today?
Baptized 1965, and I never looked back. Today, if you can know Jesus and what he's about, it'll be the most important thing for your future.
Does it give you a lot of confidence knowing that if you died, that you've got a place to go?
When I ride, or if I drive a car, I never turn a wheel out of the yard without praying first for safety on the way. I've been knocked off my bike at least 4 times.
Golly.
Without serious injury.
When did you start riding a bike?
1950, probably 51. I had a classmate in college that was quite a cyclist, and he got me into it. He would ride me all over town in Albion, Michigan, on his handlebars when I didn't have a bike.
Yeah.
So I got a bike, I think it was 1950. I started riding with him. So I've been riding ever since.
You ride 4 times a week when the weather's good?
Well, like I say, I haven't been on. You said you saw me
about 4 weeks ago.
I was surprised to hear it was that recent because I thought I'd been off longer than that.
No, it's about. And then Alvin also sent me a picture of you leaving this parking lot. And that was on a different day. So it's if it's not been 4 weeks, it's been 5. It's been very recently, since around Thanksgiving. So you've written some books, right? You've done some publications. You've written some books.
Oh, book.
Yeah.
I have one book. It's not published.
But it's just online?
I sent the manuscript up to you.
I got it and I read it.
And I've sent it to a number of other people. 2 publishers accepted it, but they wanted a few $1,000s to make it go, and I'm not going to pay for it, put out there. But I would like to put it out online for anybody to read it free if they want it.
How would they get to this? Well, first tell us what this. What would you call it? A book? It's what, 32 pages?
Satanic Globalism, its rise and soon coming fall in the days of these kings, Daniel 2:44. Daniel's prophecy says in chapter 2 and verse 44, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It would put aside all earthly kingdoms. Now, these kings, you have to study Daniel's prophecy in chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8 to put this all together. But when he talks about the days of these kings, he's talking about the kings that came out of the breakup of the Roman Empire in the 6th century. And at that time, AD 538, Emperor Justinian handed political power over to the papacy. And we gone into the Middle Ages after that. But that's all a long study.
Now, you get into the fall of the Roman Empire in your book.
There have been various efforts to try to get the Roman Empire back together, and they all fail. Right now, we have a little bit of cracks in the EU, Brexit coming on. Daniel's prophecy said they will try to get it all back together, but they will not cleave one to another. That's in verse 43. Verse 44, I mentioned.
So you think Daniel was prophesying the 6th century?
Daniel's prophecy reaches till the end of history. No doubt in my mind at that.
Was he a prophet of God? Was he a...
Well, it isn't just Daniel. The Apostle Paul, the Apostle John.
You think they all described to the end of time?
Jesus himself said that there would come a great time of trouble just before he comes back.
Well, that's always, isn't it? Trouble.
There's always been trouble, yeah, but never quite like what's coming up. There'll be a worldwide conflict. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. Such trouble such as the world has never seen until that same time.
Well, could this be the pandemic?
It goes on in verse 2, I think it is, to say that, or even to verse 1. At that time, thy people, Daniel's people, will be delivered. Some of them waking up from the dust, some of them alive at that time looking up. This is the Lord, we've waited for him, and he will save us. Isaiah chapter 25, verse 9.
When you say Daniel's people,
Daniel,
did you say Daniel's people?
Paul, in his letter to Galatians, said, if you belong to Jesus, you belong to Abraham. The Jewish people, the promise that was made to Abraham came on down through the Jewish people. But the Jewish people had a hard time with Jesus. They finally had to kill him to get rid of his trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But when he went out of the temple the last time, Matthew 23 talks about that. He said, your house is left to you desolate. You're not going to see me anymore until you see me coming in the clouds.
Now, the apostles thought he was coming back in just a few months.
Oh, yeah.
The way it reads.
And in 1844, actually the whole first part of the 19th century, there was a big groundswell of opinion, the idea that Jesus might come back then. We know he didn't come back. I brought a whole pack of stuff.
Yeah, pull that up here.
But I didn't come with my agenda. We're working with your agenda today.
We have no agenda. We have no agenda. There's no agenda.
Here's a book that was falling apart until I put a little denim on it.
Mm-hmm. To Dick and Martha from Malcolm and Virginia with best wishes, 1959.
Look at page 49.
Page 49. Is this the book that inspired you to write your book? Page.
Just skim a little bit right there in the beginning of this chapter.
The Apostle Paul in the second letter of Thessalonians told the great.
And you don't need to go into a big, deep study with it, but this is an important thing. It happened then, and we've been living with the consequences ever since.
The consequences of what?
Of religion dominating politics all through for 1,260 years. I don't know if it has a date right there in that section or not.
It doesn't.
But when Justinian handed the reins of politics over to the papacy, 538, the Bible talks about a prophecy that would go for 1,260 days. But also the Bible talks about a day for a year. 1,260 years after 538, do the math.
538.
538, 1,260. 1,200 would be how much? 1,700?
1838, maybe?
5 and 12
is 17.
And 60 from 38 is 98. Now, I don't know if French history says anything much to you, it's 1798, but as a matter of historical record, Napoleon sent his general down into Rome in February of 1798, arrested the Pope, took him out, put him in exile. Some people thought that was the end of papal domination, but the Bible has something to offer on that.
Now this is Ellen White. This is the Seventh-day Adventist lady,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Prophet.
I can tell you a little bit about her.
Well, you got a lot of notes.
But the thing right here in John's prophecy and Revelation, he talks about different beasts representing different powers, but it comes down here. One of these powers had a deadly wound. And it goes on up here to tell you the deadly wound was healed. And all the world paid attention to that power. That's where we are today.
It says after the beast.
The papacy was put down in 1798.
What's the papacy?
The Catholic headquarters in Rome. By the way, I need to be careful not be too hard on Catholic people, Christian people. But the papacy is a political organization. That's the head of the Catholic Church in Rome.
Still today?
And today. In 1929, the fascist government of Mussolini made an agreement to give the property back to the papacy, the Vatican property. And the deadly wound was healed.
So that was the deadly wound. But
I'm touching so lightly on 1,000 different things here and with no background. And I have to apologize for that.
That's okay. So, but what you're saying is that we are approaching what you consider the end of the time and the explanation of Revelations and Daniel.
Yeah. Chapter 12 talks about some of the different conflicts of history, but the last verse here in verse 17, the dragon, that refers to the devil, was angry with the woman, and the Bible uses the woman to symbolize churches. A woman
and went
to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. Now, the commandments of God also comes up over here 14, he had this vision. He saw an angel flying in the midst of heaven. And with the message here in verse 7, how much territory does that take in? I guess
when you say territory,
it needs to go back to verse 6, I think. To preach to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a worldwide thing. Verse 7 tells you something about what the message is. It talks about the right kind of worship. It also reiterates here almost, the wording is almost the same as in the fourth commandment back in Exodus 20 on Mount Sinai. They were given the 10 commandments. The fourth commandment says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for a long time, Christians assumed that Sunday was okay. But the Bible also talks about a power that would come that would think that it had the authority to change the day of worship and put Sunday in the place of Sabbath, Saturday Sabbath. That's why I go to church on Saturday. I go to church on Sunday too. The test hasn't come yet. But when this comes to a political test, then the choice will be clearer. If we follow God, do we follow a human institution against God's commandments?
Do you think that today in our politics that they're trying to do away with the church?
The idea that politics is becoming more entangled with the religion, I think that's part of the whole scene, the whole picture. Now, Trump has had quite a following with the evangelical leaders. I don't know where that's going to go in the next few days. There'll be a lot of interesting things happen. Alvin used to ask me, "Do you like Trump?" when I come into his office. Well, it's not that simple. As a Christian, I have to love him, but I don't have to approve of what he does.
Well, why do we care about when the end of time is? We're probably not going to live to the end of our end of times. Mine and yours both is going to be very soon in the big scheme of things. At the end of our time.
End of the time for history. Well, the time will come when this crunch will come and the whole world will be called on to make a decision. Some of that is right here in chapter 13, coming down through here. A decree will go out. The people that don't agree with this thing will be under a death threat. A death sentence will come to the people that don't line up for the kind of worship that they will be pushing forward. And that is, like, I'm trying to think of the quotation that fits there. And then the end shall come. But for you and me, Jesus was clear on one thing. Our life is not that certain. I don't know if you've never been knocked off your bike.
Yeah, I have.
You have been knocked off.
Yeah, and knocked myself off a few times.
Were you hurt bad?
Broke my wrist.
Broke some bones?
Yeah.
When I was knocked off in February of 1997 near our home up in New York, a neighbor came by with his pickup truck with a snowplow on it. It wasn't plowing. The road was clear. The road was wet. This is in February, about 20 degrees. But his snowplow stuck out there and hit me on the butt and knocked me off my bike. Didn't hit the bike. Boom! Threw me down in the mud. A young woman was following along behind him. She stopped her car and hopped out. She said, "Are you okay?" I laid there in the mud and I yelled, "No."
How was you hurt?
They brought an ambulance and picked me up. I was hurting. My hip was hurting. My elbow was killing me. 2 miles in the ambulance, I thought it would kill me. What I didn't realize they started to tear my pants off. And the people came to the ambulance. I said, "Don't tear it." I said, "I can take it off." I tried to peel a strip steak off my backside where it hit me. And later on, Martha said the blood didn't wash out of the pants. I looked at it closely. It wasn't blood. It was paint off the snowplow.
Oh, golly.
But that was probably the worst of my knockoffs. And it happened just a few weeks before we came down here looking for housing.
Why did you come to Cleveland?
Our sons both live in Collegedale. They came down here to go to the college down there and never came home. And I had retired 4 years before that up in New York, and I was ready to leave the New York winters.
What city were you in New York?
Norwich. It's, if you're familiar with anything, there's Syracuse, one place, and Binghamton, the other place. Norwich is sort of in between, closer to Binghamton, and Utica about 50 miles the other way. So it's the central part of New York. A countryside that looks a little bit like here, quite hilly. When I first moved there from Michigan, I called them mountains.
Why did you move from Michigan to New York?
Well, I had a job offer with that company I worked for 34 years.
Doing research.
We moved shortly after Martha and I were married. I took the job.
Did you go to college?
Albion College, 1952. University of Michigan, 1954, with a master's degree. Yeah.
In what?
In biology, zoology. But I went back after my 2 years in the Army. I went back to graduate school in pharmacology, studied drugs for another 2 years.
Not to be a pharmacist, right?
Well, actually, it was a graduate program. Most of my colleagues already had a pharmacy degree. I had a degree in biology, but I didn't do well on 2 graduate programs for a PhD, and I'm faulted for that because I probably just didn't have a clue what it takes to the nuts and bolts of putting a doctorate together. And I was floundering at that time. I was going with Martha. I hesitated. I didn't want to get married because I didn't have a job. But as soon as I had a job offer, we did get married. so I wasn't a very good student in graduate school, but I learned quite a few things. And
was that after Korea?
I worked in pharmaceutical research for 34 years. Yeah.
Did you go to college after Korea or before?
Yeah, I was 2 years in that. 1956 to 1958. We were married in the fall of 1958, and then I went to work.
You were on up in years for you was 27, 28. So you were old for that era to get married, right?
Yeah.
Didn't most people get married earlier then?
Well, happens. It didn't happen earlier.
But the majority of people got married earlier, right?
Yeah. Many people marry younger than that. It's probably a good idea not to marry too young. We were in our upper 20s. You get a better idea of what you're going to do in your life, and it's easier, I think, to grow together. You're married?
Yeah.
Long time?
Yeah.
40 years?
No, 25 years. About 28 years. 28 years, yeah. I forget. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, I'm still.
She's still with you.
She's still with me. Do you have any secrets to staying healthy?
Well, it started on that thing you mentioned a little while ago. Marrying an Adventist wife. The Adventist church is noted for longevity. A large part of that is a vegetarian diet. Flesh food will kill you. You don't need it. But people like to eat flesh food, ham, steaks, yeah. And we did that. We didn't shift it directly into a vegetarian diet for several years after we were married. And over a period of about a year, we sort of moved away from flesh food. We don't use any kind of flesh food now. Haven't since 1965.
Do you eat eggs? Do you eat eggs?
We do use some eggs, some cheese, we use mostly soy milk. We haven't used dairy milk for a number of years. Ice cream.
Now in the Bible they drunk milk and ate animals.
Yeah, and cheese.
Yeah.
That's in the Bible. But there are health problems connected with eggs and cheese, but especially with flesh meat. Red meat. Some people say, well, fish is mentioned in the Bible, but there's a pretty good case that can be made. Just leave off all the flesh food. If it bleeds when you cut off the head, put it back on the shelf. You know, if they put a sign on the meat counter over here at the grocery store, they put a sign on the meat counter of flesh of dead animals, it might hurt their sales.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Especially if they knew how they killed some of them.
Yeah.
But do you, going back to health, do you drink any Cokes or no coffee?
When we were first married, I would drink a whole pot of tea at supper time, 5 or 6 cups. And I drank coffee black, but there are health questions with those things too. Better leave it aside.
Yeah.
The other thing too, why would an Adventist girl marry somebody who was drinking and smoking, which I was at that time?
What'd you drink?
Drink? In Korea, we had Canadian Club whiskey for $1.50 a bottle. No taxes.
Was it cheaper than the water? Or was it better for you than the water there or anything?
I kept a bottle in my wall locker in the army. But I'm not proud of having been into alcohol. I'm very fortunate that I did not become addicted to the point of alcoholism and all that problem. But I was still, for a number of years after we were married, we had a little house there in Norwich on the top of a hill. That was my training hill for more than 30 years. It rose 500 feet in a mile and a half.
Boy.
And
That's like Chilhowie, isn't it?
I rode to work. It was about 3 miles to the lab where I worked. So I rode to work. Sometimes I'd ride in the wintertime if the road was clear. One day I rode in the winter and it snowed during the day, but when I got my bike, I was going to get home up the hill. I passed 3 cars that were spinning out because the hill was slippery. On my bicycle, I passed the cars. Because on a bike, you got your weight right over the traction. You know.
Yeah. Unless there's ice, slick ice. Unless there's slick ice.
Yes, if it spins out, then you're down instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to your book. What did you write? Is that a thesis you wrote, or a essay, or a book?
Satanic globalism. You think about it, global politics, global affairs generally, they're operated on selfish principles. Self-defense, foreign policy, make America great again. The world generally operates on self-centered, self-concern. But selfishness is not going to heaven. There was war in heaven. It says right here. The devil fought, but he didn't win. The test came in Genesis 3 to Adam and Eve, and by the way, I believe the Bible has a good handle on history. That's not a majority thing today. People don't accept the Bible for authority. I do. But anyway, the story there goes that the tempter came. Adam and Eve were not to eat of a certain particular tree. Just one place. They could have everything perfect, fitted out for them. But this one place, just a test of self-control. The tempter came and said, God's holding out on you. I could read that to you in Genesis 3. He knows if you eat from this, you're going to be like him. You're going to know good and evil. And she wanted that enlightenment. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And she took some. And they handed, in my book, I say that in that event, they handed world government to the devil. And he's been at it ever since. He claims control of the world. When Jesus was tempted in the wilderness after his baptism, one of the temptations that the devil came to him with was that he took him up on a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the world, and probably all the history too. I don't know how he did it in a vision. He says, if you just bow down one time and worship me, I'll give you all of this. But Jesus wouldn't do that.
But didn't Jesus already have that?
You only worship God, you don't worship the devil. But today, most of human affairs and most of the world governments operated on the same principle. The devil still has too large a hand in the world. There is unselfishness in the world. God is still working, and my book talks about that too. But selfishness is not going back to heaven. And anybody that clings to it, the devil will bring this test, life and death. I was talking with Alvin about that some time ago, and he said, when that test comes, nobody can buy or sell. He said, you want to starve? Well, if it comes to that, God is able to feed me if I need to be fed. It's not necessary for me to follow the world in the wrong kind of worship. God's commandments are given once. They're not changed. But we talked about Daniel. Part of Daniel's prophecy says that somebody would come and they think they had the power to change times and laws. The only one of the 10 commandments that has anything to do with time is the Sabbath commandment, the 4th commandment. Remember. The world is telling us today, forget what God said to remember. It's a minority position. But you come down through history.
But now, is the Sabbath day in the 10 Commandments in the New Testament?
Yeah. God's truth hasn't really been the popular way of things all down through history. It's been a minority thing.
What about like leap year?
What about?
Like leap year. When when it has one more
day.
day.
People talk about the calendar. They say, how do you know which day is Saturday, which day is Sunday, which day is the 7th day? One thing about this, the Jews are counting this year 5,700 and something. They've been keeping the same 7th day for more than 5,000 years. Mm-hmm. Is that a problem? But suppose it is a problem. Do I want to know what the 7th day is? Look at the first day and count back one. Sunday. Sunday is observed, people will tell you, because Jesus rose from the tomb on Sunday, the 3rd day from the crucifixion. Fine. But that's still first day. Some places in Europe, they're showing a calendar that shows Sunday as the 7th day, but that's an imposition. I don't know if you have a calendar.
But the commandment is to rest on the Sabbath.
Any of your common calendars, Sunday is the first day.
Yeah.
First, and it counts down. Saturday is the 7th day. It's not really a problem. But people can argue about the calendar change. The calendar was changed, and they dropped out 10 days, but they didn't change the days of the week. It went from a Friday, I think it was, I don't remember the exact numbers, but they dropped out 10 days. It just went from Thursday to Friday, just the same.
I'm not sure if I think God's going to be that legalistic towards us.
You're not sure?
I'm not sure if God's going to be that dogmatic about, sending.
It's not a question of a day. It's a question of allegiance.
But
I just told you, I go to church on Sunday, but nobody's told me that I have to.
Yeah. Do you think that going to church once a week centers a person up to have a routine? Like with this COVID, we haven't been going to church, and I don't know what day it is. I can't get my head straight. And I feel like that going to church on Sundays gives me it lets my brain know that this is a new week, and it gives me some kind of
and I have to honor
centering.
that feeling. Back to this little book that was given to me in 1959.
Did Ellen White
Yeah.
sign that to you?
Did she what?
Did Ellen White give that to you?
No, Malcolm Hartwell.
Okay, yeah.
This particular one is published, I think, in 1956, but it was originally published in 1911. This is the 1911 edition. I started to say, these people, I was going to church with my wife Martha at that time, in a little town of Otsego, New York, not Norwich, is about 30 miles from where we lived. Every week going with her, and these people gave me this book, this Great Controversy. It has the whole, some of the stuff in the Middle Ages, some of the latter chapters here haven't happened yet. Anyway, I read this book, and I was impressed with it. I was still not buying into it. She would talk to me about the Bible, don't push. But I was impressed with this book.
Did that book lead you to this book? Did this book lead you to this book?
This book has a lot to say about this book, but this book is the test. There's nothing in here that will take the place of anything here.
You can get to heaven with this. You don't have to have
it
this.
doesn't add to it. It doesn't add anything. This book has all we need.
So it's like a commentary.
But this one is this is an important book. And a man that read my book, my manuscript, said, "Oh, it's a mini Great Controversy." Yeah. Let's take a look at the last page of the text here. Just scan a little bit here. This is after it's all over, and the Bible has that too.
Yeah, this is actually in that book.
And over here, Revelation 20. Where's 20?
No. Right here.
Yeah, it comes down here.
Well, you can read good upside down, you know it?
Pardon me?
You can read upside down.
I could quote it probably.
Oh.
But verses 7 to 9 here talks about the final windup of a conflict. Let's
Right.
skip over here to 21 first. He says, I saw a new heavens and a new earth. The holy city came down from God to the earth. Now over here, the devil has a chance once more. All the people, all ages of history are raised up. The ones that are inside the city belong to Jesus. The ones that are outside the city come up and try to conflict. They try to take that city. What does verse 9 say?
And they went up.
If this is true, that scene will have everybody that ever lived on the face of this earth, from the beginning to the end, It's our choice whether to be inside the city or outside of the multitude. Jesus said, go into the narrow gate because broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many go that way. Most people don't have enough time to think about this. They're busy with their lives, they're busy with their families, their occupations, they're busy with politics. Some people spend their whole lives wrapped up in politics, either left or the right, and never in their whole life come to understand the truth and love in Jesus, Jesus' love and deliverance.
Do you think heaven will be here on earth, or do you think it will be up in the heavens?
Well, this same passage talks about 1,000 years in between, but at the end of that 1,000 years, the city comes back down to the earth. The earth will be swept clean with fire. I can show you what it talks about that in 1 John, not 1 John, it's 2 Peter chapter 3. The earth and the things that are in it will be burned up when Jesus comes back.
And then we'll be here?
He will take his people to heaven for 1,000 years. They'll come back down with the city. But I was just going to, there was something I was going to look at there. The fire is referred to here Second Thessalonians chapter 2. Read along in here. Mm-hmm. In chapter 1 talks about fire. Here, verse 7, 8, somewhere right there.
In flaming fire.
Fire. Again, here in chapter 2, and in
you got more notes than a piano.
2 Peter chapter 3. Here, verses 9 and 10. Verse 9 is a good one. Mm-hmm. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise. Mm-hmm. He wants everybody to be saved. Everybody that cares about the truth. But look at verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. Not secret, but it'll be an overwhelming surprise. And what's going to happen?
The heavens shall open up.
Burned up. Mm-hmm. Jesus talked about it here in John's vision in chapter 1, Revelation. Where?
But why do we care what's going to happen as long as we're with him?
How what?
Why do we care what's going to happen as long as we're...
Well, it just puts a period to the end of history, that's all.
Where do you...
But the important thing is, when this is burned up, all the selfishness will disappear. There'll be no more selfishness. Mm-hmm. Here.
Well, there won't be a reason to be selfish. There won't be a reason to be selfish. We won't all be hunting for money and power and fame. We won't have to be
missing too much of that.
We won't be have anything to be selfish about.
Only because all of the people that are there
on the courthouse square at 32nd Street is the law firm of Logan Thompson Law. Since 1965,
do you think we will know
they
as
have
we've
served
known?
the legal
Do you think
needs
we will
for the
know?
good citizens of Cleveland, Bradley
It says so in
County.
1 Corinthians
If
13.
you have a problem,
We will know there
they're no
even as
problem.
we are known
Give them
here.
a call.
Will you be married in heaven? Do you think?
People, they asked Jesus about that. He said a certain woman
I guess it.
had a husband and he died.
Because for some people,
But there were 7 brothers. And one after the other, they died off. And she was a wife for all 7 of them. And they asked Jesus, whose wife will she be? in heaven. Jesus said, you don't know what you're talking about. In heaven, that's not like that. God will take care of it, whatever the problem is. But here in verses 12, 13,
The New Jerusalem, is that what you're getting at?
righteousness will be there.
Where do you think, in your opinion, where do you think God came from?
What do I think
God came from.
came from?
Yeah, in your opinion.
A Jewish rabbi had a pretty good take on that. He said that in the Hebrew scriptures, in Genesis 1:1, the Hebrew thing is like a C. He says you don't have anything before that. There's no the beginning. The Bible talks about a beginning. It's the beginning of the world. God is from eternity. Nobody's ever going to tell you where he came from.
It says that he came.
is.
It said he came from Mount Teman.
From what?
Mount Teman. I forget where it's at, but in there it says he came from Mount Teman.
I'm not here, the mountain.
Yeah, Mount Teman. That's what it says. But it doesn't say where Mount Teman was.
Mount Seir?
Teman. Teman.
Oh, T-Man. That's, I can't explain it, but Jesus came to earth, and I'll have to look up that verse, because I've heard of it, I'm familiar with it. It's not talking about God the Father from eternity. We can touch on that sometime and take care of that.
Do you think Jesus was God in human form?
I believe so. Yes.
So if he was, who is he talking to who is he praying to in the Garden of Gethsemane? He said he went in there and prayed to his Father. It's always confused.
I was going to look a while ago at John 17. This brings the thought back.
But you know, we can't ever answer all these questions. Really, it's always an arbitrary thought or something. All we've got to do is believe and pray. That's all I know to do. Is that how you look at it? I've never seen a guy be able to read upside down.
I've gone fast over 100 different things here that need to be handled.
You're doing good.
But in verse 3 here, John 7.
Life is
John
eternal.
7,
You've got it all underlined.
John 17, verse 3.
Now this
is life eternal.
And Jesus said this because it's written in red, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, Jesus was saying that.
It's like that Brooks and Dunn song, Letters in Red.
And down the same chapter, he has a prayer. They want his people to be with him.
But let me ask you this. What would you say to people that want to live 89 years old and be able to ride a bicycle as long and hard as you do and be happy?
Well, I think riding a bicycle is something that can make you happy if you like it.
And not eat food, not eat meat.
When I lived on that hill and rode to work, one morning I rode to work, it was 11 below zero.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time I ever had frost form on the outside of my glasses. And I couldn't make it. I had to go into a gas station and warm my hands up a quarter of a mile from that lab where I worked. I couldn't make that last quarter mile. I go in and warm my hands up.
What do you do during the day?
What did I do?
What do you do during the day, during a normal course of a day?
Here?
No, yeah, in Cleveland. What do you do during the day?
I do more reading than Martha wants me to. But I do a little gardening. We didn't talk about construction.
No, that I'm familiar with.
There's a project on right now on Collegedale. I threatened myself to go down and help them with it, but I probably won't.
You okay?
Ugh. I'm too old to do a day's work anymore. But these are some of the places I've been.
And you've built these?
I worked on.
Oh, okay.
I worked on these jobs.
This is fairly recent because it's new material.
This is some of the people that worked on it.
Who's this character here?
This couple lived down Collegedale.
Yeah.
Jack and Janice Parker.
Who's this character? Right here. This guy right here. Who's that?
Well, some of these pictures you'll see me with my hard hat.
Okay. What would you say is the most interesting thing you've done in your life?
The what?
What's the most interesting thing you've done in your life?
Bible study. But that came later. I mean,
Yeah.
and most of this construction, this was a church job in Middletown, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they laid the bricks before they framed the walls.
I worked on one in Connecticut. We were putting up steel stud framing, 14 foot high. That stuff was so wimpy.
Yeah. So you're a carpenter, but this house was built in the 90s.
I worked here. The last day I was on that job, I was putting siding in around this oval window. I'm up on 3 stages high with rain on the boards.
Yeah. Why they lay the bricks before they framed the walls?
Well, it was brick construction. The framing is just above there. That's a 2-story.
Yeah, but the brick will get muddy when it rains because no gutters on.
By the time I came on that job, the brickwork was all done.
This is yeah.
I laid a lot of concrete blocks in Dominican Republic.
But that what you were doing this is a hobby. This is a church.
Yeah, this is all sideline. Yeah.
Have you done a lot of traveling?
We traveled quite a lot when our children were quite small in the country, not in foreign countries.
Now your son, he lives in Collegedale?
They live in Collegedale, yeah.
What do they do?
John works for TVA. John works for Little Debbie's in their truck garage. He's scheduling, I think, some kind of office work. He went to the diesel school in Nashville in 1980, I think it was. So then he took a job down there at Little Debbie's.
My cousin went to that school.
Paul works for TVA in computer engineering some kind.
My cousin went to that school in Nashville. My cousin went to that school in Nashville.
Yeah.
Nashville Auto Diesel College.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we dropped John off there with a bag full of groceries and found a place for him to have an apartment. He was in an apartment where the guy had a number of those students from the Diesel Auto College in his house, and they were drinking and partying, and I don't know. John stayed clear of that stuff. I don't know exactly how, but
Are you sure?
oh yeah, he doesn't touch anything like that. But anyway, I had a lot of fun on these construction jobs, and even before that, dial back to 1965. I was baptized 1965. We were going to that little church in Otsego. Martha didn't want to go to church in Norwich where we lived because they were reading in an Oddfellows hall, and she didn't think that was appropriate. But a little later,
Were you an Oddfellow? Were you a member of the Oddfellows?
we weren't, no. But nevertheless, time came when we wanted to build a church in the town where we lived, in Norwich, where I worked. And we were renting a house at that time. The landlord gave us an acre to build a church on. I drew the plans for the church. And I didn't lay any blocks there. We had hired a guy to lay the blocks. But I worked on laying the basement foundation. And we had a friend, a contractor came with a bulldozer and dug a hole for it. And that's a whole nother story. That church should have been all on one level. It's a church for athletes. If you get people go up and down the stairs, that's terrible.
Bad idea, right?
If you gave me $1 million, I'd tear that thing down and put them on a new building somewhere all on one level.
$1 million wouldn't build it no more, would it?
We built that church. Our cash outlay was less than $40,000. But this is 1968. And like I say, I drew the plans for it. We got the plans approved, and we had the place prefabbed in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Allentown?
Allentown, Pennsylvania.
That's where John Cougar's Mellencamp's from. No, that's where Michael Jackson's from, right?
What happened?
Michael Jackson's from Allentown, isn't he?
I don't know. Michael
Jackson.
Michael Jackson?
Yeah, isn't he from Allentown?
I don't know. It's possible.
I think he is, yeah.
The company, Northern Homes, it went out of business, but the president hired a truck, and he got our package on the truck and delivered it up in Norwich in one time. We had the laminated arches. I set the shoes on the foundation for the arches. When they came, they went in position according to my plan, and I thank you. And I worked in plumbing and wiring, roofing, windows, doors, and all of these different jobs, every kind of.
What happened to your finger? What happened to your finger?
Something was wrong. Back in the day, we didn't have kill switches on the lawnmowers. I reached down to the lawnmower, and my finger went under it more than I could think, and the tip end of it hit the blade. The surgeon tied it all together and made it look like a baseball bat. If he had just left it alone, it would have healed up fine. It would have been much better than it is now, but I lost part of that joint for the lawnmower.
That's where they have that writing that says, don't put your hands under this.
Well, I was doing something on the lawnmower, and I reached down with my hand on the deck, and my fingers went underneath the deck, and I didn't notice what I was doing.
I bet you didn't do that again, did you? I bet you didn't do that again, right?
No.
Let me ask you this. Did they, they talk about the greatest generation being people that were born during the Depression, and which would have been you, and then they had World War II, then the Korean War, then Vietnam.
I saw a man came from University of Colorado and showed a film where I worked there in Norwich. A very interesting film. You can search it by title, by the way. What you are is where you were when. What you are today is where you were when. And it was shown as a training film in where I worked, and there were people of all ages there. I was older than some of the younger people that worked in my section, but he'd show different events from history, and they say, yeah, you can relate to this. You can remember those things that were significant in your time.
And that's what makes you what you are?
He called it significant psychological experiences. And we mentioned John Kennedy's assassination, 9/11. These things are indelibly etched in your memory. So this professor, I don't put that on top of the Bible, I forgot that. Yeah. In the University of Colorado, where he worked, he was a professor, said the students want to bring their bicycles. They always want to bring them inside so nobody would steal it. And they had done a nice remodeling job or something, renovation. It had nice paneling in the corridors. Hey, bring a bicycle in and lean it up against the panel. He said, I took that student's bicycle, put it down on the ground, and stamped the shit out of it. You gave him a significant psychological experience that he would never forget.
I bet it worked. Kind of like your finger.
I'm sure that student didn't bring Mike in there anymore. No.
So maybe we are what we are because of a series of events, not just one. Hopefully, it's not one thing.
Yes, and if little children can come up to think of Jesus as their friend rather than to think of God as somebody ready to step on you.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal.
All the difference in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to be today. And I talked some about the conflict coming up over the Sabbath question.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is all on that project.
Yeah.
Martha and I did roofing on a job in St. John, New Brunswick. Had 20 apartments under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
Every apartment had a gable and all those valleys and ridges. The coordinator on the job was Jackie Henderson from California. Jackie, I got the name wrong. Fenderson, not Henderson. I came down off the job. We were working for roofing there for a week and a half. I came down one afternoon. I told her I finally figured out what the word Maranatha means. By the way, Maranatha is a Bible word. But anyway, I was making a joke on it. Maranatha, I said, it's a French word that means I hurt all over. Because you know, if you've done roofing, you know it makes you hurt.
It'll make your everything hurt.
For a week and a half.
Yeah. Roofers don't make enough money, do they?
Don't what?
Roofers don't make enough money.
Well, we had a new roof put on our house. The kids wouldn't let me go up there. But Martha and I put a roof on a radio station building out in Benton, probably at least 10 years ago. I don't remember what the year was. We did it in February. It was cold. The wind was right off the icebergs.
A radio station in Benton, Tennessee?
There's a small radio station building out there. Dr. Steins, the dentist, he's retired and gone. He died several years ago.
And it's a radio station in
But
Benton?
he was putting up a radio station for Adventist radio thing out there. I don't know if they're still broadcasting or not.
So you put shingle roofs on?
But
You put a shingle roof on?
yeah, Martha and I did that roofing by ourselves.
Yeah. 10 years ago?
I'm saying at least 10 years ago, maybe more than that. I don't know. I'd have to look back in my notes to know when it was.
Yeah.
But it was cold. The thing was, we had borrowed a shingle lift to put the shingles up there. We put all the shingles up there, and I think we had 30 bundles left to throw down when we were finished. So we put them back on a pallet, and the dentist's wife, by the way, she called me yesterday. She lives out toward Glad Springs somewhere. She's still out there. But she called me after the job was finished, and what do you do with those shingles? I said, and at the same time, in those same times, I was helping a guy build a garage out there in Benton, and she thought maybe I'd taken the shingles for his garage, but I didn't. I left them there on the job. They were left on pallets. And I felt like 2 cents. He said, well, did you take the shingles? No, I didn't take the shingles. Where are they?
And she called you yesterday?
Well, it turns out the local lumber company out there had came and picked them up. It was a special order from Maryland somewhere up there, and they had got them through them, and they just picked them up and took them back, and they give them credit for it.
Sure, yeah.
But it all worked out. But while they were missing, I didn't know what to think.
People are suspicious, aren't they?
But I like construction, and I've worked on at least 24 of those jobs. I went back to Dominican Republic in 1994. Martha went down with me in 1992. Maranatha, I should have brought some. Well, you had their volunteer magazine today. This is a later edition.
There's the Tennessee, right? The volunteers?
They're based in California.
Oh, I see.
But they have a project right now on down in Collegedale.
That looks like it's Tennessee football. Well, boy, you sure have done a lot of interesting things, haven't you?
It's wonderful, yeah.
Have you enjoyed your life so far?
These are some of the jobs that are coming up.
Oh. So they just have different volunteers come and help with this project, and
You can sign on to the job and go out to it. If you don't know anything, they'll teach you on the job.
you have to pay to go yourself, obviously,
But
right?
well, people like me, if they've been out there on 24 different jobs, you learn quite a few things.
Yeah.
You know, when you're putting vinyl siding on, you like to lap it so that you don't show the joints. I put vinyl siding on a church up in Shelby, Michigan, next to a corner and over toward the door. I was this high up with my vinyl siding. I've been lapping it all toward the door.
And you switched backs.
The boss came and he looked at, oh no! I said, no problem. Take it down, put it all back up again.
Well, it depends on which door you're walking out of. It would depend on which door you're walking out of.
Well, but you don't want those joints facing toward the door, lapping over toward the door. It's better to lap it the other way so
Yeah.
you don't see it. We did it up in Monterey, Tennessee, Heritage Academy. Built a boys' dorm up
Monterey's that way. In Monterey's that way.
there. Yeah, wherever
Yeah.
I turned around
Yeah.
here. I don't know my directions at
Yeah.
all in here. But we built a boys' dorm up there, and I was doing block work there. I was teaching some of those teenage kids, the girls, how to lay blocks. You take the trowel and you slap it, that it doesn't slip off. You put it
Yeah.
on. So I taught them how to lay blocks. We laid up a wall, 14 blocks high, and it was something like 60 feet long, and one end of it was off 2 inches from the plan. We took it all down while it was green, put it back up again the next day.
You better do it now before it becomes a problem. Well, Mr. Burns, anything else? Where can people read your
We
book?
touched our fingertips on 100 things here. But I've been going with Alvin for at least 10 years, probably. Did I tell you how I met him? Martha and I had been over town on bicycles, and we were bicycling down Keith Street, went by his place, and Jeremy came out. He saw us going by on bicycles, then yelling. Well, people yell. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm still going along with him. But he wouldn't quit. He kept on yelling. I finally turned around and he waved us in and talked to Alvin about cycling.
About 10 years ago?
At least 10 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
This is one I should have got into this one.
The prophetic faith of our fathers. That's another addition to the Bible,
I'll
right?
give you one Bible verse that shows what that means.
Okay.
This guy, Froome, he spent 20 years. This is volume 1 of a 4-volume set that deals with how people for the last 2,000 years have been thinking about Bible prophecy. And I want to tell you, evolution doesn't say anything about what's coming in the future, but God's Word does. I'll show you one.
Boy, you got a lot of notes. Are these your notes?
Pardon me?
These your notes?
Yes. I've done quite a lot of underlining in all 4 volumes. But this is the key. Evolution doesn't touch it. But here, Isaiah 46, am I on 46? Yeah. Chapter 46, verses 9 and 10. Read 9 and 10 there.
Remember the former things for old, for I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure.
That's not Nostradamus.
No.
That's God telling you He knows what's coming.
So when you see all these prophecies, well,
And you can't.
It's very
do it-
confusing,
You
isn't
can't do it in one brief session.
No.
This whole section here, chapter 47, 48, 49. By the way, chapter 47.
I believe that everybody just has to work it out for themselves.
It's an idea that the Muslims are good on one thing. They talk about submitting to God. If I come at the Bible and say, well, I've got my own agenda and I'm going to make the Bible fit what I think, it's not going to work. I got to think what the Bible thinks. Now here, in 47, verses 14, what does that tell you?
Behold, they shall be as subtle, the fire shall burn them. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. There shall not be a coal to warm, nor a fire to sit before them.
That's hellfire. It doesn't burn forever. When it's done, there won't be enough coal to warm your hands. That's what your Bible says. Malachi says somewhat the same thing.
So you're doing away with the everlasting hell there.
Sometimes when Alvin will ask me a question and I say, hand me your Bible. He's got a Bible right behind his ear. Hand me your Bible, I'll tell you the answer to that question. Now here, in chapter 4 of Malachi, behold, the day comes, it shall burn like an oven. Yea, the proud, all that
do wicked.
do wickedly will be burned up. That's that burned up again. They'll leave neither root nor branch. Burning? Not, yes. Plenty of fire. I told somebody, I believe that there's enough fire to satisfy the most bloodthirsty Baptist. But
I like the verse that says, God came to seek and save his children. And I feel like I'm his children.
what's that again?
I like the verse that says he came to save his children, and I feel like I'm his children, so he's going to save them. Mr. Burns, I enjoyed it.